Welcome back to ALEC TV. I'm Tom McLaughlin, coming to you once again from the States and Nation Policy Summit here in Scottsdale, Arizona with ALEC. I'm joined now by Jonathan Wood, who is an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, you recently authored a report regarding the Antiquities Act, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I authored a report for the Center for Growth and Opportunity based at Utah State University.
Awesome. Can you tell me more about this report and how it kind of deals with federalism and federal land use?
Sure. So the idea of the report is how can we reform the Antiquities Act in a way that restores the separation of powers, makes Congress more involved in federal land use decisions, and gives states more influence. The Antiquities Act, one of the odd things about the Antiquities Act is that despite being 113 years old, it's more controversial now than ever, and most of the controversies remain unresolved. So a lot of statutes like Obamacare, you pretty quickly find out what's okay in the statute and what's not. And the Antiquities Act probably has more open questions today than it did back in 1906.
So what kind of policy issues come to the fore when you start looking at the Antiquities Act?
So the biggest one is how much discretion does the president have? At the time, the thinking was the Antiquities Act was about protecting discrete objects of antiquities, essentially. Right. And so you would set aside small areas of land to protect those Antiquities Act. And initially that's pretty much what happened. But lately, the president has been using the Antiquities Act to designate millions of acres at a time for very broad political motivation. So if the president's supported by environmental groups, they'll pick areas that matter to the environmental groups. And generally, it's become essentially a blank check for the president to decide what can and can't be done on federal lands, even though the Constitution says that's Congress's job.
I was going to say, that seems a little bit unilateral to me.
Absolutely. And the worst part about it is it's completely unaccountable. Generally, when presidents use the Antiquities Act, it's in the last month or two of their second term, once the idea of being, voted out of office or held accountable in any way is out the door.
So, okay, the big question there is, why isn't Congress doing anything?
I think part of it is that it's hard. So until something shakes up the way the Antiquities Act is being applied, it's going to take a lot for Congress to get over the hump of drafting legislation. But it is possible. Last year, Congress enacted pretty broad federal land legislation, which included input from every single state, designated millions of acres of wilderness, actually created a couple of monuments. And what that shows is that when Congress really does take this seriously, it can create federal land policy in a way that is collaborative and consensus-based, rather than the one-way political ratchet that we've seen coming from the White House.
Right. So in your report, you believe that Congress should be more involved with the Antiquities Act.
That's exactly right, and I think we can prove that that's what would happen if we reformed the Antiquities Act. It's been reformed 2 times, and the way it's been done is state by state. So rather than taking across-the-board reforms, there's been an exception for Wyoming, that no new national monuments can be created there, and that no national monuments over 5,000 acres can be created in Alaska. And what we've seen over the decades since those reforms were put in place is that states have more influence on federal land policy because Congress is ultimately making the decisions. And it's actually also been good for the environment. So Congress has designated more wilderness areas, more parks in those states because they know they're the ones that have to do it. They can't kick the can down the road to the president.
Absolutely. So this really is an issue that does matter to the states. It is a matter of federalism.
Absolutely. And the states are the entities most affected by these land use decisions, particularly western states, where most of the land is owned by the federal government. A national monument designation can take millions of acres off the table in one fell swoop and eliminate all sorts of economic activity important to local communities.
Wow, that's super interesting. It really kind of speaks to the powers vested in the presidency and the Congress, and how it really is important where that power lies. That
Absolutely.
Power lies. Yeah, so I want to actually thank you for joining me today. That was really nice. It's really interesting and always kind of cool to talk about these really nuanced issues that come to the floor at ALEC.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Keep it right here. We're going to have plenty more from ALEC TV coming up very soon.